Alright, this is chapter 2 of On Task by David Badre. There are some pretty complex terms in here, so please don't get too mad if or too aggravated with me with the spelling or the pronunciation. Alright, chapter 2, The Origins of Human Cognitive Control. Around 500,000 years ago, a hairy, lanky, bipedal creature knelt in front of what is now a gravel quarry in the parish of Boxgrove in West Sussex, England. It held a hammering stone in its left hand, and in its right a rough-hewn flint hand-axe that it had brought there to sharpen and refine. In a single setting, this ancestor of Homo sapiens, named Homo heidelbergensis, knelt and napped away at its axe with the hammer, first probing and tapping, and then with a focused strike, knocking off larger flakes of stone. The axe it was crafting is called a biface by archaeologists because it would have two symmetrical faces angled to a point at one end, with the other blunt and easy to wield in the hand. As a tool, the axe would have been akin to a Middle Pleistocene Swiss Army knife. It could cut, stab, grind, scrape, or pound depending on the task. And so these axes were likely central to life for early hominids. Crafting the axe itself would have been an exacting process as our Boxgrove napper worked. Bits of flint flaked off with each hammering strike, piling up inside the creature's kneeling thighs and scattering out in a fanned pattern before it. Occasionally, a bigger or uniquely shaped piece would flake off. Noticing this, the napper would pause its work, pick up the piece, and place it nearby in a nearby pile to sort through later. These bigger pieces of flint could be useful for all sorts of other purposes, and so going through this pile might yield some valuable additional tools to make along with the sharpened axe. Once it finished with its tasks, the napper went on its way, toting its new tools with it, and leaving behind only the dust and debris of its labor. The sequence of events by a single Homo heidelbergensis on one day some 500,000 years ago was reconstructed in detail down to the hand in which it held its hammer by archaeologists Mark Roberts and Simon Parfitt. was reconstructed in detail down to the hand in which it held its hammer by archaeologists Mark Roberts and Simon Parfitt. They were able to do so because of the scatter of flint dust and flakes the Homo heidelbergensis left behind was stunningly well preserved and uncontaminated by either human or animal activity. In these archaeologists' hands, the flakes were evidence of a sequential task, a plan that unfolded in time to achieve a goal. It is tantalizing to imagine we see in this ancient ancestor's industry the echoes of our modern capacity to get things done. The task certainly holds some basic characteristics of a complex goal-directed behavior. The goal of a refined hand axe can be conceived of in advance and pursued over multiple episodes and settings. Indeed, the axe was not initially crafted at the Boxgrove site, but was brought there from another place just for refining. The goal of having a refined hand axe was abstract enough to have persisted over these changes in time and place. The process of making the axe itself was sequential and required managing many subtasks and goals. The biface is an example of what archaeologists term achuline, stone industry, an advanced form of flint napping that is distinguished partly from earlier, simpler forms of stone tool making, named oldowan, by its complex multi-step crafting process. The coordination, planning, monitoring, and skill required to manufacture this type of advanced hand axe is not seen in any other species, even those that use tools. And, for humans at least, Acheulean axe crafting engages cognitive control systems. Neuroimaging experts by anthropologist Shelby Putt have shown that modern humans flint knap to make an Acheulean axe in contrast with simpler Oldowan forms. That when modern humans flint knap to make an Acheulean axe in contrast with simpler Oldowan forms, they exhibit more activity in the same frontal and parietal brain networks associated with cognitive control function. That pile of bigger flakes that our box curve napper set aside to go through later is perhaps even more interesting than the axe. Cognitive archaeologists Thomas Wynne and Frederick Coolidge have speculated that the second pile is evidence of early multitasking. In this interpretation, this Homo heidelbergensis had at least two goals. One was to refine its axe, and the second was to find some other useful flakes along the way. While knapping its axe, it monitored for a nice big flake. When one came along, it paused its task and switched to the second one to place that flake in a separate pile. And of course, the separate pile itself implies an intention to go through that pile later to find the most useful flakes. Under this interpretation, then, the Homo heidelbergensis had both foresight and the ability to work towards at least two goals at once. How do we draw a line from Homo heidelbergensis, who is smart enough to have engaged in this day of axe refinement, to humans who are smart enough to reconstruct that day based only on a preserved pattern of flake scatter? This is an important question to answer because it provides a functional context for any ideas we might have about cognitive control and the mechanisms by which the modern human brain achieves it. It is by now a cliché to state that nothing in biology makes sense except the light of evolution. Nevertheless, the insight in its maxim should not be missed. By considering how and why humans' capacity for cognitive control emerged, we can frame how we think about cognitive control function. What are its goals? What are its adaptive advantages? What are its costs? Our answers to these questions provide important framing for the control mechanisms we will consider in later chapters. In this chapter, we will consider why and how human control function evolved, even given the scarcity of evidence and its known limitations. Compositionality and generativity of human behavior. What changes in cognitive and brain function mark the evolution of cognitive control? Tracing the evolution of history of a cognitive function is a hard task. If you are interested in the evolution of a wing or a claw, you can place fossils next to one another chronologically and have a pretty concrete picture of how the structure changed over generations. But you can't excavate a thought or dust off fragments of a goal. Rather, archaeologists must rely on the traces that our ancestors left behind and try to reason about the behaviors and cognitive processes that would have been required to produce them. Of course, this approach has many limitations that are well known to archaeologists and anthropologists. For example, the mere construction of a sophisticated item, like an Acheulean axe, is not sufficient evidence of a high intelligence or advanced cognitive control function. Many species include their own behavioral repertoire. The construction of complicated, intricate things without needing anything like an advanced cognitive control system. Take this example of a spider's web. Spiders are remarkably sophisticated and have effective tools. Are remarkably sophisticated and effective tools for predation. Across species, some use 2D and others use 3D web designs. Some webs are stationary air filters, while others are nets that move through the air. A single web incorporates different skills, ranging from strong structural threads to a soft and sticky capture thread. The construction of a familiar orb web involves a sophisticated sequence of behaviors to construct a hub, frame, and a radii. Spiders build with seeming purpose, taking shortcuts, adding scaffolding, strands, and removing them when they're done. They correct and revise as they go. Individual spiders can even alter the mesh density and structure of their web designs to accommodate differences in vegetation, climate, and the type of prey in the area. If Homo heidelbergensis had made a primate-sized spider web, one could imagine the gushing words written on the topic. Surely, these historic primate webs are evidence of mental plan and behavior, and of behavior guided by the image of a future web. Only an advanced memory could have stored all the necessary steps to implement such a plan. Managing the multiple tasks of frame, hub, and spiral building, all while monitoring the overall web design, surely required cognitive control. And language must have followed from the need to discuss the latest web designs with friends and boast of that big juicy bug still lingering at the lips. Of course, no one is claiming that the spider possesses these advanced cognitive abilities. Indeed, spider web building is a great example of an exquisitely complex behavior that can be achieved with only a few simple rules. For example, scientists can stimulate orb spider web building, including adaptation to environmental variation, using a virtual spider that makes decisions based only on the most recent threads it has touched. Thus, the spider has no need for a deep planning capacity, cognitive control, or a goal of the web it wants to build. For 400 million years of evolution have endowed the spider with a set of behavioral instructions mapped to its particular sensory apparatus. Following those rules is sufficient to produce a complex and adaptable web that meets the spider's needs. It is not possible, then, to look at a particular behavior on the product or the product of a behavior, like an axe or a web, and infer with certainty that what cognitive processes are required to do that thing. Just because humans complete a task using cognitive control does not mean another species is also using cognitive control for that task. One certainly has more confidence that a recent ancestor of a human would perform a task in a way similar to the human would, and would use a similar brain system. But, strictly speaking, it remains an inferential leap to assume that because modern humans use cognitive control systems to make Archuleta axes, ancestors of humans must have done so too. If I scanned the brains of humans while they somehow tried to construct spiderwebs, it would surprise no one that they would show activity in frontal and parietal areas related to cognitive control. Put plainly, given our particular neural and cognitive specialization, we would lean on our cognitive control systems for a difficult and unfamiliar problem like web making. But such an observation says next to nothing about the spider. To interpret the archaeological record, then, we need to have a firm idea of the kinds of functions that we think evolved. What is particularly characteristic of human cognitive control that we might look for in the industry of our ancestors? As a good starting place, It should not be overlooked that a human being could actually plan and construct a spider web given the right materials, tools, and desire to do so. Even if it had opposable thumbs, a spider would never be able to make a stone axe. Indeed, it would never occur to the spider that a future existed in which it was the owner of such an item. Herein lies the basic asymmetry. Our human cognitive control system is general and has two basic ingredients. First, we are capable of conceiving of future situations and goals we have never experienced or considered before, within either our own lifetimes or the lifetimes of our ancestors. Second, our control systems can plot out the complex actions necessary to achieve that future. We can readily bridge thought with action. Other species, for the most part, have to discover an action through trial and error or wait on evolution to give them the solution. So, unlike the spider that never even had a goal of a spider web, the human could make a web, but likely have a goal to do so, and then plan the way to the final product using cognitive control. The distinction is evident from the limits on our current artificial intelligence, AI, and is why anxiety over the coming AI dystopia is misplaced. The recent achievements of AI are remarkable. Computers are driving cars, beating humans at chess and Go, and research and recognizing speech. Machines are doing things that they weren't even doing 5 years ago, and they are often doing them better than humans. There are certainly impressive victories for AI, and it is easy to see why many people like the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, Elon Musk, reason that this is the beginning of an inexorable evolution towards an artificial superintelligence that controls our fates, rather than the other way around. At some point, we will surely build an AI that is able to build better AIs than we do, which can in turn build even better AIs. At that point, the rest is mere inevitability. However, the panic is premature. We're still a long way from building a generalist intelligence akin to that of humans. Rather, we're getting better at building specialist intelligences more akin to that of a spider. As one example, AIs can now be built to master Atari games like the 1976 game Breakout. In this game, the player controls a horizontal rectangle called the paddle, positioned at the bottom of the screen. The paddle is used to deflect a ball, bounce up, and hit a set of colored blocks at the top of the screen, removing them. The objective is to remove all the blocks without missing the ball when it is deflected back down. AI systems built using large neural networks not only can master this game, they can achieve scores superior to those of human players. However, this does not mean that we are on the threshold of being ruled by the computer and alpha complex. Why not? First, this breakout playing program is highly intelligent about breakout, but that is the limit of its intelligence, which is fully specialized to performing that task. A human is not only able to learn and play breakout, but will finish playing breakout, grab a cup of coffee, fire off a tweet about being beaten by a computer, and then head home to make dinner. No AI can do that. Moreover, our breakout specialist AI is likely more specialized than you think. Many AIs are specialists not just in breakout, but in that exact version of breakout. They will struggle to sustain their performance even when the simplest changes are made to the game that they know. For example, imagine you move the paddle bar up by several hundred pixels, offsetting it from its standard position. A human might be thrown off for a moment, if at all. If it had never happened before in the AI's experience, it would likely regress almost to the beginning of its training. Why aren't humans devastated by these changes, as the AI is? One answer is our ability to think about tasks in terms of their consistent parts, like the different branches in the task hierarchies we discussed in Chapter 1. In other words, we think, plan, and reason about tasks compositionally. As a result, we're able to modify parts of tasks in response to changes without affecting what we know about the rest of the task. We can adjust to a new paddle position without losing what we know about ball physics or the objective of the game. Compositionality also lets us take useful subparts of old tasks with us to new tasks as the need arises without having to relearn the whole task. For example, a human player who mastered Breakout would likely be quick to master the game Pong as well. In Pong, the paddle bar is vertical rather than horizontal, but the basic control is the same. The paddle is used to reflect the ball across the screen past an opponent's paddle. Humans would be able to take their understanding of paddle control and the physics of the square ball bouncing from Breakout and apply it almost immediately to Pong. Psychologists call this ability transfer. In this case, the transfer is positive because something learned in one context is applicable to a new context in a beneficial way. Moreover, here we're taking only one component of that previous task, the paddle control, to the new task. If we didn't think compositionally, we might end up with a different kind of transfer called negative transfer. For example, if we also took the objective from Breakout to Pong, namely trying to hit the rectangle across from us, we would be worse at Pong than if we'd never played Breakout at all. Control makes okay. Something I want to point out about that I thought was interesting is I'm studying this on this program called language transfer, and he talks about positive transfer and negative transfer, and he talks about it in the same way as here. So I thought that was a cool little correlation I made. I don't know if that'll be relevant to any of you, but it's just a cool little correlation I made. Back to the book. Control makes our task performance generative, meaning that we can not only conceive of, but also carry out tasks that we have never done before, and for which evolution has not endowed us with a hardwired program. Control achieves its generativity by opening over a compositional action structure, combining and recombining precompiled parts of a task we have performed to carry out the new tasks. Notably, these qualities of generativity and compositionality are also hallmarks of another uniquely human adaptation, language. This similarity is probably not coincidental, as language and cognitive control share a close relationship, and the adaptive process and the adaptive success of each probably relied in some part on the status of the other. Indeed, there is a long-standing debate as to whether they are fully separate systems. Episodic future thought. Importantly, compositional action is only half the story. We pair a generative and compositional action system with an ability to envision new, fantastic, counterfactual, and hypothetical scenarios. Cognitive neuroscientists call this ability episodic future thought. Imagine for a moment what your birthday will be like next year. Try to make your image as vivid as possible. Picture the scene and those acting in it. Walk through the events in time. What do you say to people? How do they respond? Is there food? What time of day is it? Now think of something funny or even scandalous that happens during the party. Imagine how everyone reacts, and what happens to the party from there. How detailed did your image of this future birthday get? If you're like most people, then this hypothetical future was rich and detailed, indeed. It is an amazing facet of your cognition that you managed to generate this detailed image of a precise event that has never actually happened. We humans have a profound ability to conceive of hypothetical futures, whether immediate or distant. We can even consider futures that could never happen. We can imagine ourselves as a colonist on Mars, or as a fish swimming around in a pond full of frogs, or as a toaster oven. Even with these impossibilities, we can generate a pretty detailed image. Further, we can plan for the future at varying degrees of granularity. We can run little simulations in our head, walking through hypothetical events at an exquisite level of detail. Or, if we want, we can also predict coarser future states, or even guess at likely outcomes without much detail at all. For example, predicting that we'll enjoy lunch tomorrow with a friend doesn't require simulating the moment-to-moment events of the episode. How do we do this? The first clue is that this type of detailed future thinking has a close relationship to our ability to remember our personal past, termed episodic memory. If you've been in psychology at all, you've probably studied this. So that's another little correlation you can make. Episodic memory specifically refers to our ability to remember episodes or experiences from a particular time and place, and typically features rich detail. Further, these remembered episodes come along with conscious re-experiencing, an intimate personal feeling of belonging in this past. In other words, with an episodic memory, you are able to feel you are there and know it to be your own experience rather than someone else's. In the brain, episodic memory partly relies on the hippocampus, a structure found deep inside of each temporal lobe. If the hippocampus is damaged, a person can develop amnesia, which is a form of disorder of episodic memory. Now, the term amnesia can be confusing. Real amnesia bears little resemblance to the amnesia familiar from such blockbuster thrillers as The Bourne Identity. Real amnesiacs, like the famous patient H.M., lose memories of the past, but unlike in movie amnesia, it is their more recent memories that are vulnerable to loss, not their old ones like their name or occupation. Further, real amnesiacs find themselves unable to form new episodic memories as soon as a memory is no longer able to be held in the intimacy of consciousness. It may be lost entirely. Importantly, however, our memories are not just mere snapshots of a particular time and place. For our memories to be meaningful and useful, we place episodes within a narrative that fits our general knowledge of the world. Thus, we don't remember our past just by opening some file drawer in our brain and pulling out whatever is in there. Rather, we piece together individual recollections along with a lot of inference to construct a model of a likely past. Scientists sometimes call these models a schema. To see why schemas are powerful for remembering, imagine that you have a box of old wedding photos. Each photo is like an individual memory. It is a moment of knowledge that captures an arrangement of people and objects at a particular time, and when the snapshot is clicked. You can think of the hippocampus as being essential for taking these snapshots and pulling them back up to consciousness on cue. However, as a disorganized pile in a box, the individual photos cannot provide much beyond what each captured at a given moment. Now imagine that you construct an album for those photos, organizing them by time or by a theme. For example, in one picture, Uncle Zayad is happily dancing to the Macarena, and in a later picture he is seen at a table holding an ice pack on his knee. We can guess what befell poor Uncle Zayad, though it is never pictured. A story unfolds in this organization of photos that would likely be difficult to discern from the individual snapshots. This constructive nature of our memory is what gives it its power. The knowledge that results from organizing memories is more than the sum of its individual pictures. There is a story in the gaps in this form. A schema, like a photo album, can be generative. Because you have general knowledge about the world, you can draw inferences about things that must have happened that are not present in the individual memories. In the brain, schemas depend on a broad network of areas that include the hippocampus and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Evidence from the neuroimaging experts using functional magnetic resonance imaging suggests that the ventromedial prefrontal cortex interacts with the hippocampus and other brain regions when people use schemas to draw inferences and make decisions based on their memories. Likewise, patients with damage to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex do not show dense amnesias, but they do exhibit problems using schemas. As one example, ventromedial prefrontal cortex patients often confabulate. Confabulations are distortions of memory in which the patient remembers events that never actually happened and that are incongruous with reality. A confabulating patient might explain that they were delayed arriving for an appointment with their doctor because they could not find a place to park. They will then seem unconcerned when it is pointed out to them that they neither drive or own a car. Or they might complain of the hassle caused by a broken arm, all the while clearly having no cast or injury of any kind. The confabulations are often quite fantastic. There are also not intentional attempts to lie or deceive. Rather, they are wrong or even bizarre reconstruction of a past or present reality. Owing to their brain damage, these patients are in some way failing to evaluate their memories with plausible model of the world. Confabulating patients offer an extreme case of a more general facet of memory that we will all experience: false memories. False memories can cause us to place someone at an event they never attended, or to remember hearing a fact we never actually heard. Indeed, in rare cases, false memories can be the source of considerable pain and injustice. One telling statistic from a nonprofit innocence project is the estimate that close to 3/4 of false convictions overturned by DNA evidence have been a result of witness misidentification. In other words, a false memory of who committed a crime. Why would we evolve to have a memory system so vulnerable to distortion, given the obvious costs? In some ways, false memories are worse than forgetting. At least when we forgot, we don't remember anything. Remembering something that is wrong can lead to real problems. One answer to this question is that our memory system did not evolve to accurately reconstruct the past. Rather, the hippocampus and ventromedial prefrontal VMPFC and other components of the memory system and the brain evolved for schema building. Schemas are useful not just for reconstructing likely pasts, they are also crucial for forming ideas about possible futures. Our explicit memories are there to inform our futures, to draw on events from the past to model a plausible future. This ability to model the future is the adaptive feature that drove evolution of our memory systems. Rather than the ability to accurately recall on our personal pasts, no one failed to reproduce because they forgot the exact number of stripes on that tiger they saw, but they might have if they couldn't use that one encounter they survived to generate hypothetical models of future encounters with the tiger. False memories are the price we pay for having a generative memory system. If this view of memory is correct, a key hypothesis that detailed episodic future thought should rely on the same hippocampal and VMPFC systems in the brain that the episodic memory does. Neuroimaging experts have found evidence consistent with this hypothesis. With the same brain networks consistently being activated, whether people remember a past event or envision a future one. Further, when patients with amnesia are asked to imagine future scenarios, the future they envision have fewer details and lack the vividness of those of people of a similar age and education do not have a memory disorder. People with confabulation disorder likewise have difficulty planning their personal futures. For example, one such patient answered questions about what she would do later by saying she was going shopping or cooking supper. Yet she had never gone shopping or cooked anything since acquiring the disease that led to her disorder. It is this system of future episodic thought, built on our episodic memory system, that allows us to engage in advanced planning and goal generation. Okay, guys. It is this system of future episodic thought built on our episodic memory system that allows us to engage in advanced planning and goal generation. Rich episodic future thinking can leverage our vast stored knowledge of facts and experiences due to things like conceive of making a spider web in the future. It follows that this capacity to generate goals is central to understanding the evolution of a system we use to achieve them, cognitive control. And to some degree, our vast ability to engage in this kind of general, hypothetical, and even counterfactual thinking may be particularly characteristic of our species. Now, any claim of a unique human capacity will be contentious, and episodic future thought is not an exception. Certainly, there's evidence for an episodic memory being used for planning by other species, and in some cases, memory is used for foresight. For example, scrub jays will catch worms, hiding them in future for consumption. They remember where they put them and will not return to the ones that have rotted. They will even replant worms in their new location if they are spotted catching them by another jay. However, this case, like most other examples of foresight in non-human species, is specific to a domain, like worm catching, that could reflect a specific evolved behavioral adaptation rather than the general capacity. Nonetheless, it is certainly reasonable that episodic future thinking is found in other species and similarly relies on episodic memory systems. But even if some capacity for future thought exists in other species, none plans for the future on a scale, depth, and generality that humans do. Human societies have contingency plans in place for asteroid strikes and hunger crises that may never come. Human children enjoy filling a box with various buttons and notes, and then burying it in hopes that some hypothetical future human, maybe they themselves in 50 years, might get a thrill. The scrub jay plants a time capsule instead of a worm. The day a scrub jay plants a time capsule instead of a worm, we might need to seriously reconsider matters. In general, the comparison is not close. Humans have an unrivaled and remarkable capacity to conceive of vivid future scenarios and possibilities. Nevertheless, as scientists, we must define concrete ways to identify when a species that can't talk to us is or is not engaging in episodic future thought. Alright guys, that's where I'm going to stop for right now. We still have about 10 more pages of the chapter. I think I'll break this up into either 2 or 3 parts, because my phone does not have enough room for me to record a 3-hour video, and I don't think you guys really want to sit through that. I'll put all of these videos in a playlist so you can go ahead and keep listening, and if the other videos are released, you can listen to those. Yeah, I hope you guys look for it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and part 2 should be released in about 1 or 2 days after this video was released. If you enjoyed it, give me some feedback in the comments, and like the video, and write anything that you, any connections that you made, because I noticed when reading this, there was a lot of connections that I was making to previous stuff that I've learned before, and I'm relatively, like, yeah, I've been researching this stuff for, like, maybe a couple years, maybe, like, a year at most, but I feel like there's some of you out there that's been doing a lot more research, and I really want to hear some of the different perspectives and stuff that you guys have. I think that'd be really cool. Yeah. You guys take care, and stay on task. Bye.